A heated debate about Jimmy Kimmel, cancel culture, and political rhetoric broke out on the most recent episode of The Five on Fox News, in which liberal Fox News host Jessica Tarlov humiliated her four MAGA co-hosts with a series of brutal fact checks. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, let's play a couple of clips of Jess doing her thing.
Democrats said all the right things that all of us felt about, that it was tragic, that violence, political violence, has no place in our society. And we were met with, this is your fault, and we are at war.
So she's, of course, talking about the predominant response from elected Democrats and Democratic leaders, the people who actually run the party, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination. I remember when it happened, when he was shot, I was scrolling through Twitter, and it was one elected Democrat after another, from the center to the left, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders. The response to Charlie Kirk's assassination and the political violence against him from the people who matter the most in the Democratic Party with respect to power, people who actually run the party, run the movement, condemn the violence unequivocally. And she's right. They were met with just extraordinary vitriol from the right and the Republican Party that the left does not direct at the Republican Party when political violence is meted out towards them. I don't remember such vitriol when two Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota were shot along with their spouses by a deranged Trump supporter. One of the couples actually dying, Melissa Hortman and her husband. I don't remember MSNBC hosts. I don't remember elected Republican Party leaders actually frothing at the mouth in rage at Republicans. This is all your fault. We're perfect and you're evil and you better stop it. Like, I don't remember that. I'm sure people were angry, and I'm sure people are like, hey, this rhetoric's a problem. You guys contributed to this. I don't even mind that. But the vitriol and hatred, actually, Jess herself got a lot of vitriol and hatred from Greg Gutfeld and Jesse Waters in the days following Charlie Kirk's, some of those things went viral. So she would know. She would know. She got a lot of shit thrown her way. And what it goes down to is the asymmetry of expectation. When political violence ever occurs, if it's the right against the left is expected to take it with grace and to not blame the right. Hey, listen, I know somebody from quote unquote our side committed violence against somebody on quote unquote your side, but you can't say anything to us. Like, you just can't do that. But if it's your side or somebody from your side committing violence against us, the right, well then you submit, you prostrate, you bend the knee, and you just let us yell at you. And that doesn't really work for me. We need to have one uniform standard. I would prefer a bit more dignity and grace, but if it's going to be, verbal vitriol, then it's got to cut both ways. Just that simple. Here's another clip.
There's been this move today to rewrite the story of how Jimmy Kimmel ended up being indefinitely suspended, to absolve Brendan Carr of his role in this and the government's larger role in it. But the timeline just doesn't add up. I've heard, well, read the Hollywood Reporter and read the Wall Street Journal on this. I looked through all of it, and the common denominator is that Brendan Carr said to Benny Johnson, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. And the affiliates, who were already freaking out about it for sure, decided then that they were going to pull it. And so ABC and Disney in general, Bob Iger, had no choice but to do it. There are some smart Republicans that are cautioning them to come back from this line. Ted Cruz, of all people, who's the chair of the Commerce Committee, which actually has oversight over the FCC, said what Carr said there is dangerous as hell. That's right out of a mafioso. When it's used to silence conservatives, we will regret it. We should denounce it. So I understand now we don't live in cancel culture. It's just consequence culture. And you think an eye for an eye is a good solution to everything. That's what I've seen pelted at me about this. Well, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. That is not a way to run a free society. And you can't just trample on the First Amendment because something tragic and horrible happened.
Great points all the way around. We did the video about Ted Cruz, who surprised me. Ted Cruz is almost the living embodiment of the notion among elected Republicans to put political expediency above principle. He demonstrated it in 2016. Remember, he was Donald Trump. I believe he was Trump's last challenger in the Republican primary in 2016. And they had a vicious primary against each other. And Trump said all sorts of hostile things about Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz's father, Ted Cruz's wife, Ted Cruz's heritage, and everything else. I mean, it got personal. And Ted Cruz rightly said at the time that, Donald Trump was unprincipled, a liar, all these things. So that was how vitriolic it was. And then, of course, Ted Cruz eventually bent the knee and started phone banking for Trump, realized that Trump was the nexus of political power within the party. And so he started to capitulate and became a MAGA Republican, much like Lindsey Graham. So I was surprised when Ted Cruz was like, yes, this is dangerous. And he says, look, I like Brendan Carr. I like him. But Brendan Carr should not have said this. This is a really bad precedent. This is not only an infringement of the First Amendment. This does seem like government censorship. It also creates a precedent that Democrats can use against us, and it's not going to end well. And I like that Jessica makes that point because I don't think her MAGA Fox hosts give a shit about principle. It's irrelevant. It's just about power. Well, as much as we wish it were about principle, if it's going to be about power, then you need to speak in those terms. And so she should point out, people should be pointing out, you are creating a precedent that can and likely will be used against you if you get a sufficiently ruthless Democratic leader as president who is willing to take some of the pages of Trump's playbook. Now, believe it or not, Republicans have never had to deal with that. Barack Obama was not ruthless. Joe Biden was not ruthless. Well, they prosecuted Republicans. They also prosecuted a lot of Democrats. And they have never, ever, ever went nearly as far as Donald Trump with respect to trying to censor their critics. Now you've set that standard. And so if you get a president AOC or a president Jasmine Crockett or a president, all sorts of options, right? That could very well happen now. And you should be careful about that sort of thing. And again, as she pointed out, the Wall Street Journal, which is a sister publication of Fox News, they do corroborate the claims that Brendan Carr did play a role in this decision, that the government and the threat of the government did play a major role in this decision. Soon after, this is from the Wall Street Journal, soon after FCC Chair Brendan Carr blasted late night host Jimmy Kimmel on Wednesday, executives at ABC and parent company Disney knew they had a big problem. So Jimmy Kimmel says what he says, then Brendan Carr opens his mouth, and then only after Brendan Carr opens his mouth, 2 days after Kimmel's remarks, it wasn't just Kimmel's remarks, it was 2 days after Kimmel's remarks that Brendan Carr makes his comments. Then Disney's like, oh shit, we have a problem. After Brendan Carr made his comments, advertisers and affiliates soon called after Brendan Carr had to say, the network expressing concerns about Kimmel's show. Executives at Sinclair and Nexstar, owners of more than 60 ABC stations, told network leaders after Carr's remarks that they would indefinitely preempt the late night show starting that night. So again, it is just objective fact that if Carr was not the sole reason that Kimmel was suspended, he was a major reason. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a moron or a liar. Speaking of morons and liars, now we have to deal with Kellyanne Conway on this panel. Take a look.
And Jessica, this all started for a very simple reason. Kimmel lied. He lied on behalf of ABC and Disney that this assassin is, quote, one of us, meaning one of MAGA. This guy is like Kimmel. Twisted, ignorant, unfunny, savage.
But it's up to his employer to decide what happens, not up to Brendan Carr.
No, Brendan Carr didn't do this. No.
He's gloating about it. He's using gifts of Jack Nicholson in the office.
You're using a nexus that's not there.
That's not true. And by the way, it happened on Betty Johnson's show.
No. He suggested that, but the affiliates did what they wanted to do. And
no, the reporting totally contradicts it. Kellyanne Conway, per usual, is wrong. She's very clever, but always wrong on the facts, which is why she always loses the debate. Very clever in her spin, but in a contest of facts, she loses every time. And speaking of, if you wanted to talk about punishing people for lying, just imagine what the Biden administration or the next Democratic administration could have or could do yet in the future against Fox for Kellyanne Conway. Hey, you know what? We should. You know what? We at the FCC, we do need to start talking about lies. We do need to start punishing lies. And you guys have Kellyanne Conway in, which means there's going to be a hell of a lot more to punish against Fox than anybody else. And by the way, Fox, you had to pay the biggest defamation settlement in American history because you knowingly spread defamatory lies about Dominion voting systems to help Donald Trump regarding his big lie about the 2020 election. So you are rife with falsehood. Ooh. And you have dozens, hundreds of affiliates, right, who need FCC licensure. Yeah, we're just going to start doing that. We're just going to start plucking those until you bend the knee. Imagine how Fox would react to that. Not well, I imagine. One last clip.
The fact that the Democrat Party fails to see that there indeed is a participation that many have played in the violent rhetoric, including Kamala Harris, who called President Trump a fascist. Now it's fashionable, but it is nonetheless no less violent, terrifying, and carrying the risk that other vulnerable people who did not deserve to die will have a target on their back because people like that don't see it.
Jessica, is there anything that Emily just said that you can possibly disagree with?
Yeah, actually. Or maybe just in addition, because we're just having a conversation about it. I would love it if nobody would use this kind of rhetoric anymore. And I think Amy Klobuchar made the point very well when Kash Patel was in front of the Senate this week, where she just said, I just want this to stop. I want people to stop demonizing each other. I want people to stop talking about each other this way. But that road has to go in both directions. And you say that the Democrats normalize this just in preparing for the show. Looking back at what Trump said about Kamala, even from just that short 107 days. She's a fascist, okay? She's a fascist. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. Actually, she's not a socialist. She's gone, oh, that's funny. Somebody's got to explain this. This is a radical left communist fascist. Politics today is between these far left fascists led by Harris and her group. And I know that we are supposed to live in a world where we don't take Donald Trump seriously because he just splatters everything all over all the time. And so we shouldn't think he really thinks she's a fascist or whatever. But that kid sitting at home who's been radicalized online heard all those things too.
Yeah. So again, this is a really good point, and Jessica has been probably the foremost voice pointing this out on mainstream media. She said this last year, the year before, to Kayleigh McEnany, talking about rhetoric. And she's like, listen, this is a two-way street, and we're not going to stop going down our street unless you're prepared to stop going down your street. This idea that you want to turn it into a one-way street. That's really what it is. Fox and Trump and MAGA and Republicans, they want the insults and the rhetoric to be a one-way street where they can go down it, but you can't. And that's stupid and irrational and ridiculous, and we should reject it out of hand. You know, I also condemn political violence. Political violence is unacceptable, and we should be able to litigate our disagreements while also advocating for nonviolence. So if you think that Donald Trump is a fascist, and I do, if you think that Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and I do, if you do think he and the MAGA movement collectively, not every single MAGA person, but the movement collectively is a threat to democracy, which I do, we should be able to say that. And we can simultaneously say, but in a constitutional democratic republic with elections and rule of law, you forfeit your right to political violence or political vigilantism. You don't have the right to do so. You don't have the right to engage in that. You have to beat them in debate. You have to beat them at the ballot box. You have to beat them with enforcing law. That's what you say. And if the contrary position is, well, no, you can't say what you mean, well, then why is Donald Trump, why do MAGA say that about Democrats, about Kamala Harris, about Joe Biden? Because she brought the receipts. Trump engaged in very similar rhetoric against President Biden, against Kamala Harris. I'll remind you, the guy who actually shot Trump in the ear, when the authorities were investigating this, again, they found no political motive. None. No political motive for the shooter against Trump. And they also found that he researched President Biden's tour schedule too. So the evidence seems to be that this guy was just a nutcase who wanted the notoriety of attacking a presidential candidate. And had President Biden been in Butler or nearby first, the evidence seems to indicate that this guy would have tried to shoot the president. So the point is, Donald Trump was using similar rhetoric before and after, which could have, in a different timeline in the multiverse, had a different combination of factors occurred, had the timing come, had a tour date been changed or had a location been changed, that could have put Biden's life in danger. Moreover, Secret Service, you could read reports about this, there are threats every day, credible threats every friggin' day against every sitting president. Donald Trump, President Obama, President Biden, President Clinton, and it's only gotten worse over time, and we don't all know about them. We're not always told. Like the Secret Service doesn't come out, hey, here are all the big credible threats that we had to resolve behind the scenes. It may not result in a high-profile assassination attempt, but there are credible threats against the president every day, including President Biden, including Vice President Harris. So when some people say, well, difference is between Trump's rhetoric and everybody else's that, it seems that people actually try to hurt Donald Trump and nobody try to hurt Democrats. You don't know that, asshole. You don't know. There's plenty of evidence to the contrary, to say nothing of the fact that Donald Trump just stripped Vice President Harris of her Secret Service protection, which President Biden had extended for another 6 months. And she's about to go on a big book tour. And he's still using demonizing rhetoric against the left. So her life is even more in danger now because she is stripped of the protection that she used to have. So it's a two-way street. And if you don't want, at a bare minimum, this is what I believe. Again, I believe if you think Kamala Harris is a Marxist or a communist or whatever, you should be able to say that. Now, I think it's ridiculous because she's obviously not that, but that's a disagreement of opinion. If you genuinely believe that, I believe you should have the right to say it, because you can also say, but in a constitutional democratic republic, we don't engage in vigilante or political violence against communists or Marxists. But we need to pick a standard here, folks, and it has to be mutual. What Emily Campagno, who was the woman that Jessica Tarlov just humiliated there, what she wants is a world in which MAGA get to say whatever they want, whenever they want, about whomever they want with impunity, and whatever the consequences are, they're absolved, and it's all on the left, and that Democrats, progressives, and liberals need to mind their rhetoric. It's not going to happen, and nor should it happen. One standard, both sides, pick one, and when you can't pick one, it betrays the weakness of your sides because you know you will fail that standard. So you want a gerrymandered standard where, no, the standard applies to you, but not to me. Pretty weak shit. So great on Jessica for pointing all that out. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.